Hello there everyone, welcome to the end of the year review for 2023, moving into 2024. It's the 30th, so I'm recording this literally the day before you see it, which is not that common for me, but there we are. I'm going to do what I did last year and talk about the year as a whole, how it's gone in terms of creating, how I felt, what's been going on, and a few other little things, little bits and pieces as well, but mostly that's what we're going to do. So, to start off the year, we did a nice short game with Ape Escape 2, which is something I played probably the first quarter of a lot of times and never played the rest of it all the way through. And so Ape Escape 2 is the sequel to Ape Escape 1. It's different in quite a lot of ways. The main difference for me is the music isn't quite as good. Ape Escape 1 is like jungle and a lot of fast-paced kind of beats that I enjoyed quite a lot. But the gameplay of 2 is a lot smoother than 1. It's an easier game. It's easier to 100%. It's not quite as janky, although it still has a bit of jank. It's nowhere near as janky. It's a lot more fluid. It runs at a good frame rate. It feels like it does, even if it doesn't. And it's just overall a good experience. As I think there are, with no exceptions really, although if there are, I'll get into them. I think I 100%ed everything on the list of the 9 games that we played this year, so that's 3/4 of a game every month. Not quite as good as last year, but still okay. Yeah, Ape Escape 2, I think it's a fun game. I think the games that I enjoyed the most this year are the ones that I think are just fun. And not every game on this list I would consider to be fun for a variety of reasons we'll talk about. But yeah, Ape Escape 2 is definitely a game I think is fun and I think is worth you playing and having a look at, because I think it's a good time. Emulation might be your only choice now, although you can play it on the PlayStation 5 through PlayStation Plus Classics. You're allowed to stream and download Ape Escape 2. It's a bit glitchy, which is unfortunate, but you can play it through all the way if you don't mind a bit of graphical artifacting here and there. Moving on after that, so that was from January 1st until January 17th. After that, we moved on to Borderlands 2, the pre-sequel. And what can we say about this game? Well, it's the sequel, but yes, to Borderlands 2, and should bridge between Borderlands 1 and Borderlands 2. That's the idea. It introduces you to Handsome Jack and what he's about and how he turns into a douchebag. Spoiler alert, he was a douchebag the whole time. And overall, I would say this is the start of where Borderlands loses a lot of people, because it went from cel-shaded but sort of half serious, half comedy. Borderlands 2, which was like 3/4 meme and then 1/4 game, and then pre-sequel is now like 8/10 or 4/5 meme and 1/5 game. And as far as I know, Borderlands 3 is even more on top of that. And the humour goes in a direction that is a bit not as interesting, not as well written. It's sort of a bit strange. But as a game, I enjoyed it plenty. I thought it was fine. It was certainly easier than Borderlands 2. I died a lot less times. Part of the reason why is because I didn't try and do every single super boss and crazy shit like that. I did do stuff, and the super boss in Borderlands 2, the pre-sequel, was way easier than the super bosses in Borderlands 2, especially the DLC ones. But yeah, I beat everything. I did the arenas, I did all the things. That was quite hard. Borderlands always has a weird sort of balancing thing where half the enemies can't do anything to you, and then some enemies for no reason just instantly kill you because they don't know how to balance enemies. I don't know why. But the gunplay is good. I still wish there was more combinations of guns. They always bang on about how many combinations there are, but there really aren't that many that are any good. You can have loads of combinations that are shite, but if there aren't that many combinations, you're like, yes, this is the good. I want to use this all the time. But yeah, I would say that it was good. The story's kind of there. It exists. I never really played Borderlands for the story anyway. It's the ultimate kind of good game, make the big number go bigger and make the damage number go bang. And that's what you want. You just want to explode everything with your big shotgun. And you don't really care about how you do it necessarily. It's kind of like Diablo in that way, where I'm sure some people care about Diablo's story a lot, but I don't. I just want to get the legendary spear of fucking +7 and just murder everyone. Not that that's how Diablo works, but you know what I mean. And so I will also be playing Borderlands 3, probably in 2024, guaranteed, at some point. I don't know when, but it will happen. I've already got it, so I just need to play it. And so that was from January 18th until February the 18th. moving on, we started Skyward Sword. Now, Skyward Sword is a contentious game in the Legend of Zelda franchise, but it's the last actual Zelda game. Come at me. Because afterwards they went open world, which we'll talk about later on in the video. But Skyward Sword, I think, is definitely not as bad as people think it is, but it's also not good, if you know what I mean. Voice crack. I am still a little bit sick, by the way, so if my voice goes up and down and coughing and all that stuff, I apologise. Yeah, Skyward Sword is a very linear game. It was made at the middle of the Wii's lifespan, and that's a problem because the Wii was so massively successful to such a wide variety of people that the games that Nintendo were making at the time, the Marios, the Zeldas and everything, was made very easy or very handholdy to get the people who don't usually play a lot of games into those games. And so Skyward Sword suffered from that, where it was extremely linear. They made the motion controls the whole part of the game, which is fine if they work, but a lot of the time they don't work as much as you'd like. Of course, I played the HD version on a controller, so I didn't have that problem necessarily. But the secondary problem that comes from that shows you how easy the combat actually is when you don't have to finagle with the remote. When you can just smack the buttons, everything dies in like 2 seconds, because you just go and they die. So it's certainly easier on a controller, but I found it more enjoyable. And I remember enjoying it not very much on the Wii, but I definitely enjoyed it more on the Switch. But I still think it's definitely not even in my top 5 or 6 Zelda games. It's good, but the bar's so high for Zelda anyway, so it's not like it's a bad game by any means. It's probably like a 7, which for Zelda is really bad, but then so is Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So it's about the same level of them for me, although I will say that at least Skyward Sword is an actual Zelda game. You go through a dungeon, you get a dungeon item, you use that dungeon item in other dungeons, sometimes previous dungeons or previous zones to get to new places, and then the conceit of the dungeon is designed around that one item, and then you move to the next one, which is designed around another item, and then so on. That's what Zelda is to me. Now, to a lot of people who are starting with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, that will be what Zelda is to them, and so I will become a relic of the past, destined to gather dust in the corner of the room, crying myself to sleep. But for me, it's not what Zelda is. So this is Skyward Sword is like what Zelda is, although it's too linear. It's not open enough. When your game is less open than Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, which came out on the N64, you've got problems. But yeah, overall, a good game that I enjoyed playing. And that was from February 19th until March the 23rd. So already a quarter of the way through the year. Then we move on to Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna, which is the DLC to Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And looking at the dates, it actually didn't take me that long to beat it. I beat it within a month to do 100%. Now, it is only a DLC, but considering the DLC to a game that took 200 hours took me about 50 hours, or maybe a bit longer, that's crazy. Xenoblades are so long, and I've also got to play Xenoblade 3, which I will probably do also in 2024. No guarantees, but I've got it as well, so I might as well play it. I need to play Xenoblade Chronicles X at some point. That's going to be a bit trickier, but then I'll have played all of them. But yeah, Xenoblade 2, what can I say about it? Torna is sort of an extension of Xenoblade 2 with some different mechanics slightly, and an interesting story. Now, those games actually do care about the story because it's interesting. It's a bit anime for my liking. I've said before where I liked Xenoblade 1 more than 2 because 1 is not quite as anime as 2, and then 2 is like big booba anime waifu, and that's the point. And then Torna is a bit less because the Aegises aren't as involved, and Rex isn't involved, and so you've got a bit more of a, I don't say mature because it's not that mature, but it's a bit more of a mature story. And the mechanics are just good. It's just nice to play. It's unfortunate that it's beleaguered by the Switch's capabilities and it doesn't run very well, but that's the case for many of the games that I played this year. But in general, the game is fun. The music is like chef's kiss, brilliant. And overall, I would say it's definitely worth playing, but it's the sort of thing you have to be able to... First, you have to like JRPGs, which is an effort in and of itself. But secondly, you have to like games that take a long time. And now I can't help myself, for the reasons we will talk about at the end. I can't help myself but want to get everything in it, and I didn't quite get absolutely everything, but I got all of the characters' growths and all of that stuff, which is what I care about. I didn't get every single item and every single gem and every single food, and but I did everything that all the characters needed to get maxed out. So I think that's enough for me. And that's still quite a lot. I beat all the super bosses, the golden monsters, I did that. And so, yeah, I would say that this game I enjoyed even when doing all the grindy stuff, which is impressive. Sometimes I do like grinding in games. I do like just making the number become the bigger number. But sometimes there's you sort of feel the fatigue of what's the point in me doing this? I'm not getting anything for it. But in Xenoblade I did constantly feel like I was getting stronger. You could take down a boss that you took down in 5 minutes before in 60 seconds now. That's pretty good. And it feels good to get like an 8 chain of your orbs and you just smack the super boss down in one combo and you do 9.7 million damage and it dies. And you're like, yes, this was worth my time. My brain is strange, but yes, that's Torna. I enjoyed it a lot and I'm glad that I eventually played it, although it was years after I actually played Xenoblade 2. After that, we're getting into April 18th now, so on April 19th we started Metroid Fusion, which took me literally 6 days. Or 8 days. 8 days. Metroid Fusion is a game I've only ever played through once, now I've played through it twice, on the Game Boy Advance. And I would say that it's probably considered Metroid 4, right? Because it takes place after Super Metroid, directly after, I believe. Or at least afterwards to some degree. And yeah, it's Metroid 4. And it's good. I think it's a little bit restrictive. It's the same, it's also quite linear. Although the Metroids and Castlevanias are secretly linear, but they kind of obfuscate it by needing items to go back to different... It's linear but with backtracking, if you get what I mean. But I enjoy those games a lot. And Metroid... I like Metroidvanias a lot, but I don't tend to play a lot of them. I don't know why. I think I like the genre, but I don't love the genre. And so I'm not obsessed with playing all these things like Hollow Knight and all that sort of stuff. I just like the idea of them, but playing them not so much. But Metroid, you can't really go wrong with Metroid. It's just a good time. I still prefer the Prime games. That's just how I am. But yeah, Metroid Fusion, it's good. And I enjoyed it. And it's still quite difficult. Even if you have lots of energy tanks and stuff, if you play bad like I play bad, it's still a bit difficult. So it has a bit of bite to it. Metroids aren't that easy. Some of them can be quite easy, but they're not like completely free, if you get what I mean. You do have to try to engage with the game, which is nice. And that takes us to April 27th, and then afterwards we've got a bit of a timeline fuckery. We play Crash 4, and it starts on April 28th, but it ends in September the 8th. Now there's a reason for that. April 28th until about May the 7th, I was playing it every single day. And a little side story, which, you know, I talk about myself a little bit in these. I'm not hugely comfortable with expressing myself in this way, but that's fine. After about Metroid Fusion, I had a huge crisis of confidence because I didn't know what to play. And I tried to play a few things and probably got about 4 or 5 hours in a few different games and had a complete breakdown every time. I just really, really bad mental health, and I just did, it wasn't going well. And I played Crash 4 during that time, and I tried it and got beat the first 2 worlds and then didn't erase the footage, and it was not good. And so I made an idea up in my head, which I think worked really well, and I might use this in the future if I have a similar sort of problem in my brain. I decided in Crash 4 that I wanted to 100% the game, but I didn't want to commit to 100%ing the game every single day until it was done, which is difficult for my brain to pass, because it makes me feel like I'm failing. But I played through it for about a month, all the way through, and I think I beat the game in that month, or nearly did it. And then, because I wanted to change, I started the next game, but kept playing every Friday, Crash 4, and doing a bit of progress, bit of 100%, bit of 100%, bit of 100%. And that way, I broke it up into small pieces that I could actually manage. I could only have to play it for 2 hours on a Friday, or whenever I recorded it that week. And so I could manage to do it much easier. And it made it less stressful. And I managed to actually get through the game that way, which is why it took me so many months to actually beat it. I think, honestly, if I tried to force myself to do it every single day until I beat it, I would have just burnt out. So I'm glad that I gave myself permission to do it in bits instead. And I think it worked. And so if there are games in the future that I want to 100%, but they're going to take me 500 hours to do, but I am committed to 100%ing them, I'll probably do the same thing, where I do it at a certain consistent interval of the week, but that's what I do it. I don't just do it whenever I want. I do it on a Friday or on a Thursday or whatever, and it's just, that's when that will keep going on. So that progress keeps happening, but it's not a forced constant that I have to do every day. And so while we're playing Crash 4, Fire Emblem Engage starts on May 8th, which is probably the worst game I could have picked. Not because it's bad, but because it's hard. I played it on hard mode because I've played quite a lot of Fire Emblem, so I know how the games work. But Fire Emblem Engage is pretty hard. And so I played that from May 8th until July 8th, which is 2 months. And I did everything there was to do. I did the Xenologues, which were really hard. Some of them took me 5 or 6 hours to beat one level. But that's because I'm good, but I'm not that good at Fire Emblem. And I enjoyed my time with the game. It was sort of a step backward for me from Three Houses, because Three Houses was trying new things, and I liked the battalion system, and I liked the story, and I liked the characters, and the setting, and all that. And then Fire Emblem Engage, kind of on purpose, went back to the basics of what Fire Emblem is. So you have your weapon triangle, and you have your partner system, and you have your maps where you have permanent death, and sometimes for a lot of the maps in the beginning of the game you don't get to reset when you lose a character, so you just have to restart the level. And it's difficult. And it did do some things, like the Engage moves that let you do special moves, where, like, for example, you can move 8 tiles and you do more damage the more you moved, or you can hit in a square, or you can take a load of damage and tank for the team, or draw aggro, or whatever. And that was interesting. And the game is just pretty hard. I would say that the hard mode, this is an example of one of the games where I feel like I would probably, if I played it, or recommended to play it for the first time, I'd probably play it on normal, even if normal is too easy. It's the sort of game where I feel like its version of what is hard is not the fun kind of hard. It's just enemies have more stats than you do, and they are harder to hit, and they hit you harder, and you don't get any benefit whatsoever for playing on hard. It's not like you get more XP or anything to balance out that level. It's just, but technically you do, because there's more enemies, so you get more XP from them, but it's harder to live. The balancing, it's not quite there. I would like a mode between normal and hard, like extra normal, where it's a bit harder but not as hard as hard, and sometimes that happens. And Fire Emblems are kind of notorious for this, because sometimes their ultimate lunatic, or merciless as it's now called, mode isn't that bad, and then sometimes it's like insane. For example, Path of Radiance, its version of impossible lunatic mode isn't that hard. It's hard, but it's not like mentally hard. But Radiant Dawn's version is very hard, at least from what I remember. I might be wrong, but that's what I remember. And so, even within the same series, the difficulties aren't necessarily consistent, and Engage tends towards the harder, unless you know the strategies. If you know the strategies to blow it open, as with most Fire Emblems, they're incredibly easy. You can get certain skills and certain things that make it so you essentially can't die, and you'd have to try to die. And so, yeah, I think Fire Emblem, I enjoy the series a lot. I'm looking forward to the next one whenever it comes out. I'll play them. I'm not interested in the dating stuff necessarily. I just like hit guy with sword, hit guy with spear, blow person up with wind magic. But, yeah, they're good. They're a good time. One final other thing I'll say about Engage. The characters weren't as fleshed out as I wanted them to be, because there were so many. They went for the opposite thing. So, like, Radiant Dawn and Path of Radiance, they're quite a lower amount of characters, relatively speaking, for Fire Emblem. So each of the characters have a lot more going on. They talk in every mission and stuff. Engage has, like, so many characters that none of them ever feel like they really get character growth or a resolution or anything like that. And they were too afraid to commit to, like if you're going to put the relationship system in the game, actually have them be relationships, you know? Have people fall in love with each other, have people fall out, have people cross one another, all that sort of stuff. And there wasn't really that kind of thing, which, I don't know, it just felt like they weren't fully ready to commit the whole way. And it's a game for teenagers, so whatever, it doesn't matter. But that was my criticism of it. But it's a good game, a bit hard, but good. Then, that's July 8th, so we're halfway through the year now, a bit more. Then we move on to Tears of the Kingdom, which is why I only beat 9 games this year, because it's so big. And again, I don't help myself because I had to beat absolutely everything. I wrote in a little note here that I did 112 episodes, some of them over an hour long. So, yeah. That lasted until November. Tears of the Kingdom is the sequel to Breath of the Wild, if you somehow don't know. And I would say it's basically just Breath of the Wild DLC. Not necessarily like a 2, if you get what I mean. It doesn't feel like Majora's Mask felt to Ocarina of Time, where essentially the game is entirely different. It's the same engine, and you get some of the same moves, but the whole concept is completely different, and the things you see are pretty much completely different, because Termina's not Hyrule. Tears of the Kingdom, you see a lot of the same elements, you see a lot of the, although they're changed in some ways, you see a lot of the same people, you see a lot of the same music and things like that. Hear a lot, so you don't see music, unless you have synesthesia. So, yeah, Tears of the Kingdom to me is not... This is the opposite problem to Skyward Sword. This is not what a Zelda game is to me. This is not what I want from a Zelda game. Is it a good game? Yeah. Is it a good Zelda game? No. Not to me. I think that it's too sprawling for what the Switch can actually handle. The ambitiousness of the thing isn't really used a lot. Like, the building mechanics are cool, but they don't really use them in, like, cool puzzle-solving ways for dungeons, right? They don't use very much. Like, you build a bridge here and there. Or you use a minecart. Or whatever. But there's nothing like, wow, this is so integral to the experience that they couldn't have just figured a way of doing this without doing it. If this was Skyward Sword, you would have just pressed A on the minecart and it would have gone down the rails. It doesn't change the game enough to make it worth making the sole focus of the entire experience. Only in my opinion. But, yeah, Tears of the Kingdom, I think, this is what Aonuma has said he wants the Zelda games to be like now. So, what can I say? There's not a lot I can do about it. It's not what I want the Zelda games to be. So, hopefully, someone changes his mind and goes back to, like, proper dungeons and intricate things, and it doesn't have to be as long. Why does every game have to be so long? Again, I don't help myself by wanting to 100% everything, but they don't have to be 200 hours long. Right? Give me a good 25, 30 hour 100% experience where it's just like everything is so tightly woven together and handcrafted and brilliant. And that's, you know, people will complain because it's not 100 hours long, because everyone has got it into their head that long is good. Long doesn't have to mean good. Long can be boring shit. Just play basically any MMO and you'll know that 80% of the time is not fun. It's the raids and things that are fun, and you have to play 100 hours to get to them. So, not always is long good. Sometimes you just want something that's very handcrafted and to the point. Look at Luigi's Mansion 3 as an example of that. Short game, every minute of it is like, nice. Everything's just good and fun to play. But yeah, Tears of the Kingdom, I would say, is also a 7. It's as good as Skyward Sword is to me, which is a controversial opinion, I'm sure, but it is. It's just for different reasons. But I'm glad I played it, and I'll play all the Zelda games because I like the series, and I want to see the redeeming features of them. And Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have redeeming features. I do like the building mechanics. I do like the gliding. I like the sky... Excuse me. I like the Sky Islands in Tears of the Kingdom quite a lot. The low gravity bits. The robot would have been cool if it was any use whatsoever, but it's basically useless. Mineru's robot. And the story, again, same thing as Fire Emblem Engage. They're too afraid to commit to a story. Are Link and Zelda lovers? Are they actually just friends? They just sort of bait. They don't commit one way or the other. I'd be happier if they just committed one way or the other. Even if it was just like, yeah, they're just friends. That's fine. I'm happy with that. That's probably how it should be. But they're sort of just like, will they, won't they? Oh, it's too risque, haha. No, it's not. No, it isn't. It's Zelda. If Mario is where Peach kisses Mario on the cheek and that's all you ever get, cool. Zelda, why can't there be something romantically involved with it? You could add to the story where Zelda's in danger and Link loves her, you know? So it's actually like there's some stakes involved, you know? Not just saving the kingdom, which is important, but, you know, people are more invested in character emotions than they are necessarily in world emotions tends to be the case. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, either commit or don't, but just choose one. Just choose something, and then Stop baiting people with will they, won't they nonsense. I don't like it. That was November 6th, and then we move on to Pikmin 4, which is November 7th until today, December the 30th, where the last episode's just gone up. And what can I say about Pikmin? Apart from the fact that Pikmin is bellissima, it's brilliant. Pikmin 1's still the best one. But that's just because, again, it's a sort of like, every concept is executed well, and it's just a very crafted, tight experience. And then Pikmin 2 is harder, but longer, and not all the dungeons hit well, but it's good. Pikmin 3 is still... All of the Pikmin games are quite good. It's like Zelda. They're all like 7 and 8s, but they're just in different ways. Pikmin 3 is too easy, so you're not in any real danger a lot of the time. And Pikmin 4 is probably also too easy, whereas Pikmin 1 and 2, actually, you can quite easily lose all your Pikmin in a 100 Pikmin squad wipe, and then reset the day or whatever if you don't want to do it again. But they're a bit too simple. This is the sort of opposite problem where I wish Pikmin had a difficulty mode that was harder. Like I could pick a harder difficulty where enemies take longer to kill, or they have different moves, or things like that. Or days take less time, or that sort of thing. So you have to plan your actions better. I did feel like I was getting better at the idea of Dandori and moving around and doing things and multitasking and stuff like that. But I never felt punished for not being particularly good at it, apart from some of the trials, which took me a while to do. But overall, I think the game is very, very good, and I'm glad it sold as well as it did. And if they can just find a way to do the same thing for F-Zero and Star Fox somehow. I think the way for Star Fox is to make an Assault-like game again, but with controls that are actually decent. That's the way, for me. Star Fox Assault is the best Star Fox since 64, in my opinion. But, yeah, they just need to figure out a way of making it work. But Pikmin, I'm glad that people are seeing the light. Obviously, it's on the Switch, which is like easy cheat mode, because everyone plays things on the Switch. But people are seeing it. It's already the best-selling one by quite a margin. And hopefully that gives people an incentive to make Pikmin 5 and make them a bit harder and make them a bit more involved. Graphically, though, Pikmin, for the Switch, pretty nice. Good graphics. Tears of the Kingdom, just go back and harp on that game again. Graphically, not as bad as Pokemon, but that's not saying a lot. And it runs at like 12 FPS. I'm joking. It does run quite bad sometimes, and on emulators it runs a lot better, which tells you that it is the hardware limiting it. But yeah, that brings us to the end of 2023. I already am starting, have started already halfway through the first project of 2024. So that's about 2 weeks of videos you've got to look forward to. And in terms of subscribers, because this is the only real time I talk about the actual channel and its health and stuff, I spoke about how many subscribers I had at the start of last video, which I will now cut to. I want to start by saying thanks to everyone who subscribed this year. I'm making a note of it here because I don't think I did last year, and I'd like to come back next year and see how we did. So I think I'm up about 70 odd subscribers this year compared to last year, so that's really good. Considering I have 200 or so, 250 maybe, so having an extra 70 is a big percentage, so I'd really like to say thank you for that. And I now have 343 subscribers, so that means I gained however many I gained. I'll put it on the screen, but I think it's quite a bit. It's actually quite a lot. And so I'd like to thank everyone who subscribed, and most of the time it's from old games that I played in the olden times, like Grand Stream Saga and things like that. If that's what you've subscribed for, great, cool. I will play, or try to play, some more retro things this year. I want to play Ark the Lad, because I've never played them, and apparently that's a kind of cool game that might be fun, and so I'll play them. But I just want to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed. If we keep up this pace, I'll have 1 million subscribers by the time I'm 53. And that would be cool. But in all seriousness, I don't do it for the subscribers. I definitely don't do it for the money because I don't get paid. And so I hope that people who watch have a good time. And the final thing I want to talk about, a bit more serious, is why I do things the way that I do them. So my sort of way of making videos is that I do edit, but my editing style is very light. I don't like cutting out things that I think are new. Even if it's not interesting. If it's new, I don't want to cut it out. You see some playthroughs of things on the internet, and people are chopping off like 5-minute blocks, 10-minute blocks, 15-minute chunks. to sort of, here's the point, here's the next story point, here's the next story point, here's the next story point, and essentially making the game like a movie where you don't have to actually watch them play the game. You just watch them bumble about in a dungeon and then go to the next dungeon and then go to the next dungeon. I don't like that. I like my experiences to feel like they're complete, to feel like that if there's a reason I'm not showing you something, and the reason I'm not showing you something is if nothing that on the journey is of any interest whatsoever. For example, the Tears of the Kingdom, when I started doing the big massive cleanup videos, a lot of the time I'm just running in the dark in a straight line from one route to the next route and do nothing in between. But if I go to a Yiga clan den, or I fight a boss, or I do something, I will show you that, unless it's a boss I've fought already and it's not new anymore. And so that's how I like to do things. I know, because I'm not an idiot, that doing it that way will massively limit the amount of growth I can have, because that just makes sense. It's not 10-minute videos, they're not hyper characterized, and I'm not shouting and screaming every second and blowing up things with editing and putting text on the screen all over the place and doing this, that and the other thing. And so, because that's just not who I am. And so I'd rather be authentic to who I am. I say this every year, but it's still true, than sort of chase the trend and try and network with people and try and force my way into communities that I don't really belong to and that kind of thing. And there's a reason that I do that now. I know now. For many years in my life, ever since I was about 8 or 9, I've thought that I may be on the spectrum, the autistic spectrum, because the way I interact and see the world isn't necessarily the same way that a lot of other people see and interact with the world. And earlier this year, probably about a month ago, I did actually get a formal diagnosis that I am autistic. The criteria for which you get judged to decide whether you are or not needs you to be all of category A, some of category B, and some of category C for them to consider you as being on the spectrum. And I passed with flying colours, baby. I got everything. It's not a competition, but I was yes to all the boxes, essentially. So if that changes your opinion of me, that's okay. I don't blame you. But I just wanted to let you know, and I won't bring it up a lot because it's a personal thing, but if you understand why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it, I like patterns and I like the routine and I like the structure, and I like showing you the structure and showing you all of this journey and not just the bits that are interesting, just the bits. I just want to show you everything. But obviously I have my limits. So like, this is going to be boring, just me running around for 10 minutes, or I don't talk because I know I'm going to cut it out. But yeah, I thought I'd let you know that that's me. And so I'm going to keep going. I'm always going to keep going. And thanks for watching, and I'll hopefully keep seeing you. Ta-ra.